So yesterday we went over the basics of the admin dashboard. We went over account management, what are the different access levels on Infurnia. We went over Project Hub, and we went over the basic structure of the catalog on Infurnia and how you can add SKUs in three different ways. One is by cloning an existing cabinet SKU and then modifying it. Second is by uploading finished materials, and the third is by uploading an OBJ, right? So from there, we will continue building more on the cataloging side. So for this, let's start with first, let's say I want to create some more types of uh, types of raw materials, right? So in Infernia, when you create a cabinet, you create it using your raw material. So you can define your own catalog of core materials or plies. You can define your own catalog of edge bands, of finishes, of hardware, and then they all come together to form the cabinet. So first of all, let's start with creating an edge band. So what I will do is I will go into hardware. In hardware, there is a category called edge band. If you don't see it over here, you can go into the add from warehouse route that we discussed yesterday. Go over there, and from there add the edge band category into your store. So let's say we go over here. So here you can add the edge bands in exactly the same way that we saw last time, yesterday when we were adding the finishes. You can create a group, give it a group name. Let's say I want to create the ivory edge band again. Add it. So over here, if I now go to ivory edge band EV, I will go over here. I'll add a SKU. So here I will enter, let's say, ivory EB 22 into 0.8. I'll explain why I'm entering this. Let's say here I add the model number at 2208. Right. So here you can define two parameters in edge bands. Yesterday we saw that in cabinets you could define three parameters, which is width, depth, height. In finishes, we were defining only one parameter, which is the thickness of the finish. But for edge bands, you can define two parameters. One is the thickness and one is the tape width. So let's say for this one, we will define its thickness to be 0.8 mm and its tape width to be 22 mm. And again, placement over here does not really matter. You can choose the brand just like we did yesterday for finishes. For now, I will just choose any brand for this. Let's say I will choose something like uh, Merino itself, although they don't make, but we'll choose Merino for now. Or you can leave it empty also. Then we'll go to add material. Here it is exactly the same as what we did for finishes. You can choose which material you want to upload. So again, let's say for now, I will upload the same ivory finish. Here I don't really care much about whether it's matte or gloss. I can just click on add. And once it's added, I can click on submit. So this ivory EB material is made. Now, if I had multiple different SKUs of this, and let's say one is in 22 into 0.8, another is in 30 into 130 is the tape width, one is the thickness, I can again just clone it to same group and just change those two values of this. Okay, so now I first want to address a slightly broader question, which is that, is there a need for creating edge band SKUs? In a lot of scenarios, you actually don't need to create edge band SKUs. If your edge bands are, if you're not counting the edge band SKU, if you're not concerned with the exact SKU of the edge band, you only want that the edges should appear in the same texture as the finish, then you don't need to worry about creating edge band SKUs. Then that part will be automatically taken care of. If, however, in your BOQs or in your pricing, you want to specify the exact edge band SKU, you have details of that these are my 20 edge bands that I'm using. This edge band I'll be using with this finish, this edge band I'll be using with this finish, this is my price of the edge band. If you have that data and you want to utilize that data, then you can create your edge band SKUs over here. Okay. So this is how you can create an edge band SKU. Now I want to introduce one more concept over here, which is the concept of linked SKUs. So for example, we just now discussed that if you have a defined list of edge bands, let's say you have 20 different edge bands that you use in your designs, but you might have, let's say, 100 different finishes. So you need to create a mapping between that. If this particular finish is applied, then which particular edge band should be applied. Again, to reiterate, if you're not concerned with edge band SKUs, you can leave it empty. You don't need to create edge bands over here. However, if you want the exact edge band SKU to come, you will have to create this mapping also along with it. Right. Now, how to do that? We can go to finishes now. Let's say we'll go into laminate, we'll go into stone. So here we had created that ivory finish yesterday. So here what I will do is, let's say I will choose this ivory pearl. Here what I can, or let's say this one. So here what I can do is I can go to linked SKUs. So this is a different concept that we had not yet discussed yesterday. Linked SKUs, what they do is they link one SKU to another. So for example, over here I have this ivory finish and I want to link it with my ivory edge band. So that is accomplished using linked SKUs. So linked SKUs in the when you are linking a SKU to a finish, it is automatically restricted that it can only link an edge band to a finish. So when you go to linked SKUs, here you will see this option. You can choose that, okay, I want to pick hardware and edge band, and within edge band, which subcategory, which particular group I want ivory, and with that group's which SKU I want 22 point into 0.08, right? I can link it and then say update linked SKUs. What this will do is, now whenever I apply this particular finish on any exterior surface of a, whether it be shutter, whether it be a carcass, anywhere, automatically this particular edge band would be applied over there. Okay. And again, if you're not concerned about exact edge bands, you don't have to do any linking. You don't have to create edge band SKUs. Automatically, this particular finish will also be applied on all the edges. It's just that the all the parameters about the thickness of it and the tape width of it and the exact SKU of the edge band, those will be ignored in your calculations. All right. So in this way, you can create this. Now, the next most important raw material is ply or core material. So for that, again, you can go to hardware, you can go to ply. Again, if you can't see ply over there, you can go to add from warehouse and add it. Okay. So here in this, talking about ply or talking about core material, this we see another type of SKUs where there is no visual data that is required. So when you're talking about apply, you don't really need to know what apply looks like. You can use a display image for it, but it doesn't really matter. So for example, finishes, you have to upload the right image. Edge band, if you're making, you have to upload the right finish. Cabinets, when you're making, you're creating those cabinets. Sofas, when you're uploading, or chairs or accessories, when you're uploading, you need the right 3D model. But when you're talking about the core material, it is never visible to the end user, the internal ply. So that's why you don't need any visual representation of it. So you can just create, let's say, subcategories within this ply category, call them, let's say, BW apply or HDHMR or MDF or any kind of subcategorization you want to create. Within that, you can create that my BW apply, I have it available in 6mm, 12mm, 16mm, 22mm. Right? I will, let's say, create one more. Let's say maybe I have one which is of 14mm also. What I will do is I will just clone this to a new group. I will call it, let's say, BWR apply. Within BWR apply, I want to create it and I will name it as 14mm BWR apply. Right. So now this 14mm one is created. And for this, I can go into its edit SKU properties and I can change its thickness. So here again, the parameter of thickness is very important. When you are calculating the exact sizes, which exact core material you have used defines the thickness of the panel, and of course the thickness of the panel defines the length and width of the other panels around it. So that's why the thickness of it is very important, and you can mention it over here. Rest of the things are similar. You can create the name, model number, brand, all of those things are same. So here you can upload details. Now with this, there is again two additional things which become important, right? The first one is that currently we have just created this as a 14mm thick, let's say, raw material, right? But this assumes that you will be applying a finish on the top of it. It could be an acrylic, it could be a laminate, it could be a veneer, right? But sometimes you're also using pre-laminated boards. So you can specify whether this particular core material that you have created is pre-laminated or post-laminated. To do that, you can go into its additional properties. Over here, search for lamination type. And in values, you can choose between post-lam, pre-lam both, and pre-lam internal. When you don't apply this, default is post-lam. So even if we don't come here and choose these values, the default is post-lam. But let's say I actually wanted it to be pre-lammed on both sides. I can choose pre-lam both. and again I'll update. Now what has happened is I've specified that this particular board is pre-laminated on both sides. But if it is pre-laminated, then I also need to specify what are the finishes applied on both of the surfaces of this particular ply. So for that, again, I can go into linked SKUs and I can add finishes over here. So I'll go to, let's say, finish. I'll choose, let's say, laminate, and I will choose wood grain, and I will choose, let's say, woods, and I will choose again woods. And here in type, I will choose that this woods should be the external side of it. I will add another link, and over here, I'll again go to laminate. I'll go to solid. Let's say here, let me find some white one. Let's say absolute white. I'll select absolute white SKU and say that this should be its internal finish. Now what I've done is I have basically created a ply whose thickness is 14 mm, which already comes as a pre-laminated board. On one side, this woods SKU is applied, woods finish is applied. On the other side, this white finish is applied. Now, when you do that, there are two other changes which happen on the designer's front. One on the designer front and one on the outputs front. On the designer's front, since this is a pre-laminated board and you have already specified the finish of this, designer cannot add this particular core material and then change its finish. They can change the core material to a post-lam one and then change the finish to anything that they need. But when they're picking up a pre-laminated board, they cannot change the finish of that. They can pick up, let's say you might create 10 different kinds of pre-lam boards, and you might be able to pick up a different pre-laminated board, but you cannot change the finish of a pre-laminated board. That is one. Second thing that happens is, because here it is assumed that these finishes already come applied on this board. The designer is not separately applying it, or you're not applying it after the fact. So the thickness of the board is assumed to be the thickness of this thickness of the ply is assumed to be the thickness of the ply, including the finishes. So when you're using, let's say, this particular pre-lam board of 14 mm with these two finishes, its panel thickness would also be 14. Whereas if I had not specified this to be a pre-laminated board, if it was a post-lam board, and I went to my design side and I added these two finishes over there on the design side, because it's a post-lam board, its thickness would be counted as 14 plus the thickness of the external finish plus the thickness of the internal finish, so roughly 16 mm. Right? So these are the two main changes that happen when you specify something as a pre-lam board. So over here, as we saw, one is prelam both and one is prelam internal. So this is basically if the board is only pre-laminated from one side, you can choose prelam internal and specify the in linked SKUs, specify one linked SKU, which would be the internal finish. Right? You cannot specify the external finish, then only internal finish. And then the external finish, the designer will be free to choose. And over there, the thickness of the board will also come out to be, let's say, 14 plus the thickness of the external finish that they choose. So roughly 15. It will not be 14 because the designer is explicitly adding a separate material on top of a separate finish on top of it. It will not be 16 because one side already comes laminated. Right? So this is how you can define pre-lamination. There is one more type of link that you can do. That is basically, so the most common way in which carcass is constructed is that if you have your carcasses, the rest of the panels of the carcass are typically, let's say, 14 or 16 or 18 mm, but the back panel is typically a 6 mm ply. So now, let's say your designer goes to the design portal and changes that all the carcass panels should be 18 mm BWR ply or 16 mm BWR ply, right? Or 16 mm MDF. That will also change the back panel. The back panel will also become 16 mm, but you don't want that. So for that, there is another link you can create over here. You can click on this, select another ply. So I can select a ply. Let's say I will select a BWR ply, but I will select a 6 mm one. And I will specify that this should be its back panel core material. Now, what this has done is that if I apply this particular core material to my carcass, its back ply would automatically be this one. So you don't need to specifically put it. Once you have created this over here, whenever your designer uses this as the carcass back ply, carcass core material, this particular 6 mm ply would automatically be the core material of its back panel. Right? So in this way, you can create your pre-laminated boards, post-laminated boards, and you can also link that if this is a carcass panel, what should be the back panel. Okay, so this is one thing which I wanted to show you, which is how you can link SKUs between edge bands and finish and ply. Right? So there is one more thing that I wanted to talk about here, which is basically the bulk creation. So till now, what we have seen is that you can go to a particular category and you can create a SKU, and that SKU would be created over there. But here, that is a slightly slower process. So, for example, you come up over here, you create a edge band, and then you basically you keep on creating it multiple times, and then you go to finishes. You're creating finishes. What you can do is you are in any of the categories. When you're in the catalog option, you can go to bulk actions and click on bulk create. If you go over there, it will list down all the divisions and all the categories over here, and you can choose which category do you want to do a bulk creation in. For example, let's say over here I want to do a bulk creation in, let's say, finishes. So I'll go to finishes, I'll go to laminate, right? So in front of this, I see these three options: import file, edit draft, and plus. Import file will ignore for now. These are the two important ones: edit draft and plus. Plus means I'm starting a new bulk create for this laminate. I'll click on plus. So here it creates an Excel-like uh, interface for you where you can go ahead and start creating those SKUs all at once, right? So for example, I want to create 5 SKUs in the wood grain category of laminates. So what I can do is I'll just go over here. I will select a subcategory of wood grain. Even if I want to create a new subcategory, I will be able to create it over here itself. So for now, actually, let's go ahead and say a new category. Let's say test subcategory. I've created this new subcategory. Now I can just pick this up. In group again, I will create a new group, call it, let's say, test G1. And I will select that. Here I can enter the SKU name. Let's say test G1 SKU. Enter the thickness of this. Let's say I'm adding a finish, so it will be 1. Enter the model number for it. Let's say TG1101. Choose a brand if I want to. Right, let's say I will choose Merino laminates. Upload the material over here again, similar to exactly how we were doing we were adding the finish material over there. But here the advantage is, and again, you can choose the exact template also. Here the advantage is that I'm doing it all over here itself, right? Now over here itself, I can also add linked SKUs. So for example, when I'm creating this finish, if I want to link it with a particular edge band, I can link it over here itself. I will also specify sales channel, which ones do I want to add it in. For now, since we have not discussed sales channels in depth, we will discuss it with pricing. I will just choose default and not add any pricing, but later on you can basically add the pricing of this over here itself, right? So now I've created one SKU. I've added the data for one SKU. Let's say the next SKU I want to create, what I will just do is I will duplicate this row and enter the SKU name as test G2 SKU. So here it's the same subcategory, same group. SKU name has changed. Model number, let's say I want to change. I want to keep it 2101. I will upload the new material, right? So here again, I can pick up, let's say, any other material. I will upload that. And again, I can enter the properties of this. Over here, I can also create a new group for this if I don't want it in the same group, because typically in finishes, you create one group per SKU. So I will create a new group. Let's say test G2, and I will pick that one. So now my second SKU is also ready. So in this way, I can keep on adding as many SKUs I want in this Excel-like format, and then I can click on Save as Draft. What Save as Draft does is that these SKUs, although you have entered the data, they have not yet been published. They have not yet been made live. So you can just save a draft and come back and keep on entering data, let's say 1 hour later or tomorrow or day after. Right? That is where that edit draft option also came in. So if I close this, and I again go to finishes, laminates. Let's say I come back tomorrow and I again go to finish laminate. I don't have to start from fresh. I can just click on edit draft and it will show me all the drafts I have. And I will click on, let's say, this draft and I'll say edit. So here, these first two SKUs are already created, right? Now, let's say I've created all the SKUs that I wanted. Let's say I've created 5 SKUs that I wanted, or 10 SKUs, or 20 SKUs that want to add, right? Now, if I want to publish, I can select which SKUs I want to publish. If I want to publish all, I will just select this, right? If I want to publish only one, I will select that one. Let's say I want to publish these two, I'll just select these two and click on publish. Here it will ask that you're publishing 2 SKUs in the category laminate. Do you want to export the copy of published file? This checkbox basically means that it will also download a CSV of this the data that you're uploading. For now, I'll just uncheck this, or let's say keep it checked and confirm. So it's a JSON file that gets downloaded for this. And along with this, now if we actually go to our finishes, we go to our laminate, you will see test category has been created within which 2 SKUs have been created, right? The significant advantage over here is it's much faster to create it because of the Excel-like format. You can just keep on entering data and duplicating rows and entering data. Over here, when you're adding, you have to do it one by one. So typically, when you're setting up your store and you want to do a lot of data entry, you can use the bulk rate options. But on an ongoing basis, when you want to, let's say, add one or two or change something about one or two, you can go directly over here and do that. Okay. So over here now, one thing I want to specify is because of the linkages, if you're using edge bands, the order that I suggest is first create the edge bands, then create the finishes so that at the time you're creating finishes, you already have the edge bands created and you can immediately link it over there. Otherwise, you will have to come over here and then do the editing, or then do the linking. But if you first create the edge band, then create the finish, you'll be able to link it at the time of creating the finishes itself. In the same way, when you want to create your core material catalog, first create your finishes catalog so that you are able to basically first create a finishes catalog. Then what that enables is you can simply link the finishes if for any of your prelam boards over there itself. Otherwise, you'll have to come up over here and link them individually. Okay. So in this way, basically, you can use this bulk creation uh, way to add lots of SKUs to your catalog at once. All right. So then there is this hardware, right? In hardware, let's say there is again two types of hardware that are typically there. One is more on the line of accessories like baskets and let's say handles, where the visual information is important. There, the process is exactly the same. You can create a new group, upload the 3D model, and given the detail. Second kind of hardware is where it is important to have some 3D model, but it is not really important what it exactly looks like. So for example, let's say you have some cutlery basket, something like this. So it's not really important that it should be exactly accurate to real life, but it should look like a PVC cutlery tray. So you can just clone this, just go over here and clone this to a new group, and then edit the display image or the name and the brand and the pricing of this. But the 3D model automatically gets cloned from our catalog. So that you don't need the 3D model. And then the third type of hardware is basically your hinges and your dowels and your minifixes. There, you don't need to add any uh, finish material or any 3D model because they're not shown on the design side. Only the data is required. So you can just click over here, go to add group, add the name, add the pricing, add the model number, and that's it. You just need to add the data for that. So there you can simply create it like this, right? So in this way, first and foremost, what we do is we create the catalog of our building blocks of a cabinet, your core materials, your finishes, your hardware and accessories, and your edge bands. Once we've done that, then we can go and we can also do cabinets, right? We can also create cabinets. So now let's assume we have created a catalog of our edge bands, finishes, core materials, hardwares, and accessories. Now we can go to our cabinet over here. So let's say I want to create this cabinet. So this we saw yesterday on how you can create, how you can rename, and how you can clone so that these are of different sizes. Today, what we will focus on is the construction part of it, right? So yesterday we created this base unit with two shutter and two shelves. So we saw how we can change how we can create multiple SKUs of this, change their dimensions, right? What we did not really do a lot yesterday was this edit SKU structure. We just added one shelf and that's it. But you can do a lot with it. So basically you can pick up any particular cabinet and customize it to create a completely different kind of a cabinet, right? So today we'll focus more on the construction of a cabinet, how a cabinet is constructed, what are the various parameters which are available to you over here. All right. Anybody has any questions so far? All right. So we'll move on. So over here, let's say this is our base cabinet that we picked up. So this you can see is made up of essentially, if I count, there are, let's say, four different parts to it. There is a carcass, there is a shutter, there is a skirting, and there is a countertop. Countertop is not really required in the construction of a cabinet. So what we'll do is we'll just go to countertop. And for now, for the purpose of this particular session, I'm just hiding the countertop. So now we can see our carcass, our shutter, and our skirting. So we'll discuss all of these one by one. So let's first discuss carcass. So the first thing to note over here is how is the carcass constructed? What are the defaults and what are the properties that you can really change, right? So here again, we will cover, let's say, 80 to 90% of all the customizations available so that almost all of your requirements are fulfilled. But of course, there are some niche requirements which you might come up with. For that, you can get in touch with with your assigned account executive, and they will help you with that. All right. So first things first over here is what is the construction logic of the carcass? So here you can see that the way we construct our default carcasses is that for this particular cabinet, our left panel runs all the way from front to back and from top to bottom. Same is the case with right panel. Our top panel is inset to both the left and the right panel. Same is the case with the bottom panel. But our back panel is slightly inside from the back and it is inset to all four sides and it is grooved into all four. So this is, we can see this visually, but let's understand where have we actually defined this. So I will just click on this. I'll go to cabinet and then cabinet, I will go to carcass and then carcass, I will first go to construction. So in construction, you will see 8 different options. Bottom left edge, top left edge, bottom right, top right, back left, back right, back top, back bottom. What are these edges is essentially wherever two of these panels are meeting. So if I look at it front on, I can see my left panel and my top panel are meeting over here. So this edge is the left top edge. Similarly, this edge is the top right edge, top left edge. Right. Similarly, over here at the bottom, you will see a bottom left edge, bottom right edge. So these are 4. Then you have wherever the back and the left is intersecting, back and left. So this is the back left, back and right. So this is the back right. And similarly, wherever the back and top are intersecting, so this we have this over here, and where the back and bottom are intersecting, we have this. Right? So if we again go back over here, we go to cabinet, we go to carcass, and we go to carcass's construction. Bottom left is wherever the bottom panel and the left panel intersect. Top left is where the top and the left panel intersect. Bottom right is bottom and right. Top right is top right, and so on. Now, on all of these, within all of these options, you have this one button only, which is to change it, right? So let's consider this top left option, right? If I again click on this, I go to cabinet and I go to carcass and I go to construction, and I say for the top left edge, change it to this. So now what I've done is over here, I've just reversed this, right? Earlier, The top panel was inset to the left panel, and now the top panel is onset on the left panel. Similarly, I can do that for, let's say, if I wanted to, I could do this for the right panel also. Let's say I could go to construction and I'll go to top right and I will change that also. So now my construction has basically changed, right? Let me change it back and show you the impact of this. So what we will do is we'll go to construction and we'll say top left, change it, top right, change it back. So this is our default, right? Now over here, let me do one more thing, which is I'll go to cabinet. I will change the material of the carcass's core material. I will change it to 16 mm BWR ply so that the panel thickness is 18 mm, 16 mm for the core material, and because it's a post lamp board, 1 mm of the finishes. Right? And similarly for the back panel, if I see, it is automatically 6 mm BWR ply because I have created a link that whenever my 16 mm ply is used, so whenever this 16 mm ply is used, the linked skew would be of 6 mm ply and that will be applied over here, right? So the panel thickness of back would be 8 mm. If I click on any panel and I go to its panel options, I can see its dimensions. The dimensions are not editable because the dimensions are calculated based on how the carcass is construction, but I can see it right now. Right? If I see this cabinet has dimensions of height is 720, width is 750. I will make it 600 so that it's easier to understand the calculations, and depth is, let's say, 560. Now, if I see my left panel and I go to panel, I can see its dimensions are 720 by 560 because it runs from top to bottom and back to front. Similarly, my left panel over here, if I see this, even this would be 720 by 560 by 18 because the thickness is now 16 mm core material plus 1 mm finishes, right? If I see my top panel would now be 564 by 560 by 18. 560 because again it runs from front to back, so the depth is still 560, but its width is now 564. That is because it is 600, which is the total width of the cabinet, minus 18 from this side, minus 18 from this side. The same would be the case if I see my bottom panel. It will again be the same, 564. Right? So now if I change my construction method and I go over here and I change it such that my construction is at the top left edge, I want to change, and the top right edge, I want to change. Now if I see this, now if I go over here and see my left panel and see its dimensions, now it is 702 by 560. 560 still remains because it goes from front to back, but now it is 720 minus 18. So it is 702. Same would be the case with this one. And when we talk about the top panel, if you see dimensions of that, now that is 600 by 560 because again, it runs from front to back and from top to bottom, right? So in this way, the way you construct your cabinet changes completely the cutting list and the pricing and the BOQ that you will be getting. Okay, so the first step that you typically do when you're constructing, creating your own catalog is to make sure that your construction is according to your own standards. And these are the properties that you use to set it according to your own standards, right? So this was one part of it where we saw how you can utilize the edges concept of the carcass to set your construction of the carcass correct, right? But now let me actually click on the back panel, go back to its panel options and see its dimensions. When I see its dimensions, it's 574 by 694. It is inset on all four sides. So let's first consider its width. It's inset on all four sides. So it should be 600 minus 18 minus 18, which is 564. But I'm seeing it as 574. That is because it is by the manufacturing that we follow in our default options is it is grooved on all four sides by 5 mm. So that is why it is 600 minus 18 plus 5, 6, and over here also minus 18 plus 5. So it is actually 600 minus 36 plus 10, which is 574. Similarly, from top to bottom, it would be 720 minus 18 plus 5 plus 5. So 720 minus 36 plus 10, which will come out to be 694. If you see its dimensions coming out to be 694. Now these dimensions are of course not editable, but where am I specifying that there should be this 5 mm groove? If I change it, if I click on dimensions and I go below this dimension, you have this option of extension parameters. Extension parameter is basically that for this particular panel, do I want to add to this panel on any one particular side? So here if you see width wise 5 mm has been added and depth wise 5 mm has been added. So what this has done is, because of the way the edges are structured, it came out to be 564 by 684, but then it was extended on all four sides by 5 mm using these extension parameters. Therefore, its final dimensions came out to be 574 by 694. Okay, so this extension parameter basically you can use on any panel to specify anything. Let's say for some of your cabinet somewhere, you have this option that with this carcass, this panel actually goes all the way to the floor. So what you can do is go to this panel, go to its extension parameters, and if we see its dimensions right now, its width is 702. So what I want is that I want to extend its depth. I want to extend towards the bottom by 100 mm. Right. So now this particular panel is going below by 100 mm. So now if I see its dimensions, this becomes 802. Okay. So we will go back to this panel and we will change it back to 0. The advantage of extensions and the way extensions works is this is a relative amount. You're not specifying the absolute dimensions. The actual dimensions are come as a combination of how the carcass is constructed plus any extension parameters that you give, right? Over here, for example, if I stretch this top panel and I say that extended towards, if I see it from here, and if I go to this top panel and I say extended towards the right by 100 mm, it creates a panel like this. Now this panel's dimensions would come out to be 700 mm. But this extension is a fixed extension of 100 mm. So even if I go and I change the cabinet size by, let's say from width is 600 to width, I change it to 900. This extension is still only 100 mm. So now if I see it over here, I can see that its dimensions are 1000 because it is extended by 100 mm. All right, so let me change it back to 0 so that it is all set again. Right? There is one more thing, which is that over here, if we go and we go to extension parameters, there is this one option at the bottom that you see switch to fixed width, right? What does that option do? If I see this, right, and I specify that this panel, by default, its dimensions would be that based on the construction of this plus any extension parameters. But let's say I want that no matter what is the depth of this, I just want it to be 100 mm panel right over here on the front. So for that, I can go to this panels option and say that on the width side, it should be fixed. What should be its fixed depth? Let's say I can specify it should be 100 mm. Once I click on switch to fixed width, it will automatically say the options will change. It should be 100 mm. Then it'll ask me, it should be okay 100 mm, but offset from the left or right, where do I want to place it? Let's say I will say offset it from the right by an amount of 0 mm. So that wherever it was supposed to start from on the right hand side, it is at an offset of 0 from the right. So it is exactly at the right. If I want it exactly over here, I can again click on this panel, go over here, go to extension parameters, specify that I want it offset from the left by 0. It will go directly over there. Right? So this is very, very useful when you want to create frame lofts. So you can keep the same construction, but you can fix individual panels exact sizes using this. All right. So here again, you see There is, if you want to, let's say, give it an offset also, if I give it an offset of 100 mm, what this will do is, now this particular panel is at a 100 mm from the starting point, and its depth is 100 mm. If now I change its cabinet's depth from 560 to, let's say, something like 360, this part does not change because I'd switched to fixed width. The width still remains fixed at 100, and this gap also remains fixed at 100. Only this, whatever is remaining at the back, keeps on changing. All right. So in this way, the sizes of the panel, first and foremost, are dictated by how you're constructing the carcass using those edges parameters. Then it takes into account if you have given any extension in any particular dimension. If instead of extensions, you want to use fixed dimensioned parameters, fixed dimensioned panels somewhere, on a panel by panel level, you can change it to fixed dimension and specify where exactly they should lie. Okay. I will just reset this. I will not save any of these changes, and I will just reset it so we can start again and talk about other features. Right. So if I again click on this particular cabinet and I go to its cabinet options and I again go to carcass. So this we have seen construction, right? What we saw as construction panels extension that we saw on panel by panel level, you can access all of that over here also. That just go to panel extensions and you'll be able to see that whether they should, you want to give any extension on the left panel, right panel, top panel, bottom panel, right? The other options over here are half tops, rails, and panel visibility. So I just want to explain what that is. So we'll just again hide this countertop. Now, in some cases, what you might want are that you don't have, let's say, a full top panel. Maybe it's a sink unit. Maybe it is you're doing this for all the cabinets. But what you want are 200 rails running at the front and at the back. What you can do for that is click on the cabinet, go to carcass, click on half top, and say convert it to half top. Once you convert it to half top, that full panel will be replaced by two smaller panels. Their default dimensions are again 100 but you can again go to carcass, you can go to half top dimensions, you can specify, let's say I want it to be, let's say 150, 150, or I only want my front one to be 150. So now this front panel is 150, this back panel is 100, back top panel is 100. Right. This exact feature is also available on all carcass panels. So if you again go see over here, right? So you have, just like you have top rails, you have back rails, bottom rails, left rails, right rails. So any of the panels, you can convert it into two rails instead of one full panel. You can specify what should be the dimension of each. If you specify to be 0, that panel is basically deleted. All right. So here again, if you actually zoom in over here and you see, here you will be able to see the grooving, the 5 extension that we have given. Okay. So let me go back and let me change my rails to full back. Now on the side of the back, there is additional parameter. If I click on the back panel and I go to this panel option, there's this option of back panel offset. If I click on, let's say my left panel, I go to panel, that option does not come. But only on the back panel, there is this additional option of back panel offset. Here, the default option is 20. What that basically means is that this back panel is placed such that from the back panel is, the front of the back panel is at a distance of 20 or to put it the other way, that the shelves which are getting added over here, they are starting at 20 from the end of the carcass. So if this back panel thickness is 8 this gap over here would be 14 because it's 14 plus 6, 20. So back panel offset as given as 20. That means the back panel is starting as 20 coming towards the back thickness of the back panel. And I can modify this. I can, if I go over here and let's say make it 50, So now this gap over here would be 50 minus 8, which is the thickness of the back panel. So this gap actually does not impact the dimensions of the back panel itself because it is only moving it backward and forward. What it impacts is the dimensions of the shelves, because the shelves start from the end of the back panel, right? So if I change this, the size of my shelf is impacted. All right, so that's one additional parameter that is given on the back panel side. So if we go back to the carcass, and if we go over here and we go to carcass again, there is this one last option available in the carcass, which is about carcass panels visibility. What this does is that you can actually remove any of the panels. So for example, if let's say I'm creating a cylinder unit and I don't want there to be any panel at the bottom, I can just say hide bottom panel, and it will be like this, where there is no bottom panel over there. Okay. So in this way, you can hide any particular panel if instead of converting it to rails, if you just want to remove a particular panel, you can just remove it from there. So this is how you can create any kind of a carcass, the structure of a particular box. So now there are a couple of other things that I want to talk about. One is, what if you want to add some end panels, or you want to add some exposed panels, or you want to add some, let's say, any custom panel over here, right? So how can you do that? So for that, what we will do is, over here, if I click on this and you go to cabinet, you go to end panel, there is this option of adding left end panel and adding right end panel. This is more used actually on the design side. So, but if you want to create it beforehand, you can keep it created beforehand. So I can go over here, go to end panel and say add a left end panel. It adds a new panel on the left, which has the exact same material properties as the shutter. So it adds a separate panel, so typically used at the end of a kitchen. So it will have the same thickness, it will have the same finish, it will have the same core glass. It's exactly the same as the shutter panel. On the other hand, if I want to mark something as an exposed panel, let's say I want to mark this particular panel as exposed, I'll click on this panel, I'll go to panel, I'll click on mark as exposed panel. What it does is it doesn't add a new panel, it just changes this panel to match with the shutter. It changes its finishes to match with the shutter. Okay. There is one more thing that you can do, and that is you can go to this cabinet, and there is this option of add custom panel. If I click on add custom panel, there is none added on my account. So what I can do is I'll go to add from warehouse, and I will go to furniture, so hardware. In hardware, I'll go to custom panels and I will select these two. And I will also select these two on apply. Now, if I see over here, custom panels have appeared, right? So we'll just refresh this and we'll see what are custom panels. So custom panels are basically, let's say we have a certain way we have constructed all the entire carcass, right, in the entire cabinet, and we have provided lots of options for you to customize it exactly how you want. And if in your construction method any of those panels are not there, you can remove those. But what if there are some additional panels in your construction? For that, there is this option of adding custom panel. So I can go over here, I can go to cabinet and I can go to add custom panel. And over here, I will, let's say, add a vertical custom panel for a base unit. Right? What this does, it just adds a default extra panel. Now this extra panel that I have, I can move it around just like I would in, let's say, SketchUp. I have all of these. I can change its dimension. So here for this one, you can specify the dimensions. You can specify the dimensions because it is these dimensions are not getting calculated with the way you have constructed the carcass. It is just an additional panel that you have brought, right? So you can change it. Let's say what I want is 720 by 600, right? Or rather 720 by 600, right? And over here, I can, let's say again, pull it up. Again, it will snap into place when you take it, when you reach near the near any of it. So if I again go back here and I can again, let's say, similar to what you will do in SketchUp, you can pull it up. You can move it forwards or backwards, whichever way you want to move it. So this is 600, that's why it's extruding out. If I change it back to 560, it will stop extruding out. So here on this panel, I can either using these controls, so I can rotate it, I can move it in any direction, or using this position options, I can place it exactly how I want. Right? So for example, I want it to be shifted towards the front by 100 mm, or I want it to be shifted towards the back, let's say by 100 mm. Right? Or I want to shift it towards, so if my front is towards coming out towards me, then its right side would be a positive side shift, and if I wanted to shift it towards the left by, let's say, 100 mm, so it is now at 100 mm distance, right? So essentially, and again, you can rotate it. So essentially, you can do all the transformations on this panel. You can specify this additional panel's exact dimensions. You can place it exactly where you want, and you can essentially place it using these 3D tools, or you can place it exactly using those position rotation options, and that basically lets you add new additional panels, right? So this is again sometimes very useful. Let's say if you have a loft where you have a filler at the top, extra filler at the top over here, like this, right? So you can add it using a custom panel. Or let's say maybe in your blind corner construction, you have an extra filler that you're adding. So you can add this extra panel and change its dimension so that it gets added over there, right? Over here. So this is how you can add this. Again, let me not save it and let me reset it. So there is the same panel movement options are also available over here. So you have this for every single panel, you have this option of translating. So you can translate it in any direction, although typically in cabinets, you will not need to do that. But if you do, you can move it around in any particular dimension. Okay. Other than this, there are a few other things that we want to cover today around the basics of cabinet construction. One of the things is shutter, right? So in shutter, if you go, there is one specific action that we want to cover today, which is reduction. So if, for example, right now our panel, our cabinet dimensions are 720 by 750. But if I see my shutters, if I click on the shutter panel and I see its dimensions, this is 373 by 718. So 718 because so height is 720. So there is a 11 mm reduction on both sides. And similarly, out of 750, this shutter's width should ideally be 375, but there is again 11 mm reduction on all four sides. So that reduction is specified over here. You go to shutter system, you go to reduction, and you can specify that on all four sides, what should be the reduction. Let's say I actually want that from the top, there should be a reduction of 10 mm. So now you can see that the shutter is actually 10 mm smaller than the carcass. It's actually 11 mm smaller because it'll be 1 mm at the bottom also. Now, if we go and see its dimensions, it will come out to be 709. So rather than 720, it is 720 minus 1 at the bottom, minus 10 at the top. But it works the other way around also. What I can also do is I can go into shutter system, and in reduction, let's say at the bottom, I say, give it a reduction of -50. A reduction of -50 means extension of 50. Right? So here again, I can see that this shutter is now covering half the skirting. So if I see its dimensions now, it will be 720 minus 10 plus 50. So if I go back over here again and I see its panel's dimensions, it is 760 because it's 720, but a 10 mm reduction at the top, so 710, but a 50 mm extension at the bottom, so plus 50, which is 760, right? But the default on Infurnia that you will see, whether it's a drawer fascia, whether it's a shutter, by default, 1 mm reduction is given over there. Okay, so that is one. And the next thing that we want to cover today is sizing rules. So what are sizing rules is, let's say you have created this cabinet, right? And now you want that your designers should not be able to, because on the design side, that cabinet dimension options are open, that they can change the cabinet dimensions. What you can do is you can limit that. You can specify that this particular cabinet that you have created, its size can only vary between, its height cannot be changed by the designer, its depth cannot be changed by the designer, but its width can, let's say, be changed between 700 and 750. So for that, I'll click on this, I'll go to cabinet, and I'll go to rules, and I'll go to sizing rules. And I can specify that my minimum depth should be 560 and my maximum depth should also be 560. My minimum width should be 700 and my maximum width should be 750. My minimum height should be 720 and my max height should be 720. Now that I've specified these rules, if I go back and I try to, let's say, change my height to 800, it will tell me that the new height is more than the max height, so the height is not changed. Similarly, if I go back and try and change it to, let's say, change my width to 800, it will not change it. But if I change my, let's say, width to 720 mm, that change will happen because that is allowed. So if you want to specify ranges, you can do that. Or if you want to specify exact sizes, you can keep the minimum and maximum as the same. And then in that case, the designer will not be able to change the size at all. Right? And if you don't want there to be any restriction, you can just put -1 over there. So if you put -1, so now this cabinet's depth can be anything. Its width can be anything between 1 to 750. Okay. All right. So today, this is what we wanted to cover, which is how you can add, let's say, more types of SKUs like edge bands and hardware, how you can add those in bulk. What is the concept of linked SKUs using which you can link your edge bands to your finishes and you can create prelam boards by linking your finishes to your ply, and how you can construct your cabinets. So tomorrow we will again continue the construction of the cabinet by focusing more on internal constructions, drawers, and wardrobes. All right. So we will stop this session over here. If you have any question, please feel free to reach out at any time. And the recording of this session will be shared with you in the next couple of hours. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. Yes, there is a question. So we'll just take the question.
Yeah, hi Manik. Sorry, Lovepreet.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so the thing is, you told that the offset can be given like 20 mm, right?
Yes,
So that is including the ply thickness, right?
yes,
So,
yes. That is including the ply thickness.
but the actual mean of the offset is like from back it will push 20 mm, right? Excluding
Uh,
the ply thickness.
for that, you can basically give it more. So, for example, over here, you can, let's say, specify 28, in which case now you have a 20 mm offset over here. The reason for this is again, every manufacturer has slightly different way of how they define terms, right? So what we found out was that a lot of manufacturers were actually doing it like this, where they define the offset in terms of where the shelf is starting from. So that calculating those sizes is very easy. Calculating the size of the shelf is very easy. So that is why we have kept it like this. But again, you can, let's say, make it 28, in which case this gap is now 20 mm. When this
So
is
the thing is, what we do know, the offset
yes,
will be like 14 mm, sorry, 12
okay,
mm,
okay,
so 14 mm, and 8 mm will be the back plate. So it will be
12.
around 20 mm.
Yeah, exactly. That is what we also do. We put the offset as 20 mm,
Okay,
and the typical ply thickness is 8 mm. So this
okay,
gap becomes 12 mm. So right now this gap is 12 mm. Then you have an 8
okay,
mm ply. That
okay,
is the default.
okay, okay. Thank you.
Anyone else has any questions? Please feel free to ask. All right. In that case, we will stop this session, and we will share the video of this with you within the next 2 to 3 hours. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining.